Sheraton, and probably had 20, 25 people in attendance at that event, most of them being members of the Democratic Caucus for Lucas County. And they were very interested in what I had to say, and that might be one of the counties that I'm able to actually persuade to follow and vote for me in the Iowa caucuses. So I feel really good about Lucas County. It's just going to take some time. You know, it takes time to get name recognition. It takes time to get people to know who you are. And I'm trying to just do that. We basically started this campaign April 15th on tax day because we felt like tax day really makes a statement. That's when everybody has to send in the money, so to speak, to the federal government. And that's the date that I picked to declare. And I was the only candidate to declare on tax day. So I wanted to make a statement about that because we want to restructure all of that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But to give you a little bit of information about me and who I am, I was born in Gastonia, North Carolina, October 22nd, 1950. My mother and father decided because they were so poor that they didn't want to have but one child. I was that only child, and basically decided to do the best they could with me. And so I grew up without brothers and sisters, but I had a nice neighborhood. We kind of moved out to sort of a family farm-like thing. We had about a couple of acres out in the country when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And my dad was a NASCAR race driver and mechanic. And most of the time he was kind of lazy, didn't like to do a whole lot. And my mom worked in the mills, and she basically made all the money that we ate on, which was about $42 a week at that time. And my dad would sometimes take that $42 and go buy a camshaft for his race car. And we would do without for the week, and we'd go to Grandma's house to eat. So I know what it's like to be poor. I've been there. And many times when we had to have money, we'd go to Grandma's house. And I spent most of my life in Gastonia, but I have lived in some other places. I went to high school in Gastonia. I went to Hunter Huss High School. It's a pretty good sized school. It was in the 4A conference there, which is one of the bigger conferences. We played all the schools in Charlotte, and I played football 4 years in high school, so I learned a little bit of toughness through all of that. I was the only person in my class to be chosen to go to American Legion's Boys State as a leader in my senior year. And I attended Boys State. That was a pretty big thing at the point. I thought, that's the kind of guys that they are looking and saying, well, that's our future leaders. The American Legion kind of looks up and sponsored me and paid for that event for me, and that was really an awesome experience. Graduated with, I was on the honor roll most of the time that I was in high school. Graduated from high school and attended Erskine College down in Due West, South Carolina. It's a small liberal arts college where I majored and got a Bachelor of Arts degree in history. I then I was on the dean's list there at school and did pretty well, and enjoyed my time there. Studied a lot of foreign policy, learned a lot of information that's very helpful to me even in this campaign. I know, and looking back, I was looking back at the economic history of the United States, and I pulled out my old book that I had from when I was in undergraduate school and just started reading some about. I found that the books, that they wrote back then, they tried to tell you the truth. They didn't try to make it politically correct or anything. They would actually write books that kind of like put real facts and statistics in them. So I went back and I looked at a lot of that in preparation for some of my talk. And so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me in terms of, went to Erskine College, and then after that graduated, went to University of South Carolina Law School. Wasn't immediately admitted to law school. There were so many people trying to get into law school. It was during the Vietnam era. Everybody was coming back and wanting to go to law school, and there must have been thousands of applications, but I got admitted through a probationary admission program, basically, into law school, and they basically they took 200 of us, and they said, okay, you're going to be the bottom third of our class. You know, we're going to let you in if you can be in the top 50. You know, that's what the competition was. So it was like, we're going to take 1 in 4 of you. So you better work hard. Well, I finished second in that group and made it into law school. And during the time I was at Erskine College, I worked all the time that I was in school. And then I worked all through law school at the same time, working for, actually after my first year I did so well in constitutional law that I got an internship with a professor and got paid for that internship. So after that, after finishing law school, I passed the South Carolina bar and then decided I would go back to my hometown to practice in Gastonia, North Carolina, and took the North Carolina bar. And and then worked for a firm, worked for a law office there with another lawyer for a couple of years, and then at the ripe old age of 27, I opened my own office and became a lawyer. And I've been practicing law from then until this date. I decided when I was in my early 50s that maybe I needed to know more about life and know more about people, and wanted to be able to serve people in a better way. And so I went back to school to Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, where I got a master's degree in divinity, and learned Greek and Hebrew, and studied Greek and Hebrew exegesis. And after that experience, while I was there, I also got a master's degree in Christian counseling, and did about 700 hours of clinical work with alcoholics and drug abusers. Worked in with some of the poorest people. We have a place in Gastonia where I worked and counseled the women there for quite a while that crack addicts, and a lot of them had serious problems, and we helped counsel them into being able. It was an 18-month program, and I helped counsel them through that program for a couple of years there. So when I finished seminary, I felt they did a lot of testing on me in seminary, and basically what I'm more cut out for in life than anything else is basically being the head of something. Like, for instance, they thought I should be the head of like a mega church, someone who has basically great managerial skills. That's what I demonstrated through the testing. And that I had the ability to move people, encourage people, and to lead people, from getting people from where they are to where they need to be. And I think that's the kind of person we need to have in Washington today. We need to be able to have somebody that can talk to people one-on-one, if necessary, and get them to move from their position. The way I look at it in Washington, everybody wants something, and everybody is willing to usually give up something to get that thing that they want. And so what you've got to do is you've got to be an excellent negotiator. And over the years, my 37 years of practicing law, I've been a mediator, I've been an arbitrator, I've learned to negotiate some of the worst disputes you can ever think of. I've also been a trial lawyer. I've tried over 100 civil cases to juries, and I've also tried probably somewhere in the nature of 35 to 40 criminal cases to juries. So I know how to effectively prosecute cases, defend cases. I know both sides of the law. I've got a lot of experience at it. So I come to the table in this campaign as a candidate who has no special interest money. I have no one that's basically funding this campaign at this point other than myself. I've had a few donations along the way, but they've been from friends and former classmates, and had one campaign donation that I had from a fellow in Des Moines who works for the state of Iowa, and he's basically that Kelso is my candidate because I like him. I like what he's got to say, and I believe in what he's doing. Until somebody better comes along in the Democratic Party, he's got my vote. And so that's how he felt about it. And I don't bring you a lot of, I'm not bringing to the stage a lot of flash and glamour and all of that. I'm not going to be John Edwards up here telling you about two Americas and getting the crowd all pumped up, really. I'm more of the person that's going to get something done. And I'm going to tell you exactly how it is. I'm going to try to do it. And you may not like everything you hear. I doubt you will like everything you hear tonight. But you're going to at least see a different vision for America tonight. I'm going to offer you a different vision for what this country would look like. And if it was restored and brought back to where it needs to be. So, like I said, I've never been influenced by a lobbyist. I know what lobbyists are like. I've been to Washington. I went with the Young Democrats to Washington when I was very young. I remember being in the FBI building in 1972 during the summer with the Young Democrats, and they basically said, right behind that glass door right there is the door off of the Watergate. And I was like, really? Okay. And I said, we just are investigating that right now. We don't know why we've got all this stuff that we took from the Watergate, but we don't know why we're doing it, but we're doing it. Shortly thereafter, we found out why. So that was quite an experience. I've been up there. I've spent a lot of time around Washington. I've been up there a number of times. And I know that the thing that there's basically three evils in life that we really need to be most on guard for in our lives. And those things are power, sex, and money. And all three have penetrated that beltway in the Washington, D.C. area. And that's what I bring to the table. I'm not going there, believe me, I'm not some attention-seeking egomaniac seeking this job. I'm going there because I have children. I have 5 children between my wife and I, and 12 grandchildren. And I'm going there because I believe America can do better with leadership than what we've had. And I think we can do it a lot better than what we had. And that's, you sit by the TV set and you say, God, I can do better than that. Well, I've heard some people say, any idiot can do better than that, But, I try to respect everybody in life. Every human being has value to me. Every person's opinion has value to me. I'm willing to listen to anybody and talk to anybody. If you look at my Facebook page, I bet I'm the only candidate that's ever run for president who has corresponded with and talked with almost everybody. You've seen that, I think.
Yeah.
And I talk to everybody. I'm willing to answer questions to anybody. And I have nothing to hide. I'm not, I would rather sit by my pool in the backyard and enjoy my time. I'm 64 years old. I would rather spend the next 8 years or 4 years, if I'm blessed with 4 years in office, that's fine. I would rather spend my time sitting out by the pool than doing this. But somebody's got to do this. Somebody's got to run for this office that cares about people, that cares about people on the lower end of the spectrum. I want to stop the spiral, okay? So one thing on my mind is helping the American people, the poor, the middle class, have an opportunity to succeed in life. Like I've had an opportunity to succeed. I was able to move from being a poor kid to being able to be a successful lawyer. I've done it for 37 years. I've written books on family law. I have the most dedication probably of any person you'd ever meet. I've sat in a room before and wrote a 2-volume book for the largest legal publisher in the world, Thompson West Legal Publishing there in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I wrote that book. It took me 18 months, and I actually wrote 2 books for them. It took me longer than that. I wrote one in 6 months, and I wrote the other one in 18 months. So basically 2 years sitting in my study 10 hours a day, every day, 8 to 10 hours a day, every day, and just getting up to eat and going back to my study and working diligently to do that book. That's the kind of dedication, that's the kind of dedicated person you have on the stage tonight. That's what I'm willing to do for you. If I'm elected, I'm willing to go and I'm willing to spend the time, whatever time it takes, however many people I have to convince. Mitch McConnell doesn't scare me, okay? There's no, Bonner doesn't scare me. There's nobody in Washington that intimidates me. one bit. I'm willing to take every one of them in my office. I'm willing to look them right straight in the eye and say, you care about America. You care about what the future of this country is going to be like. If you don't care about America, then I'm going to out you. I'm going to tell the American people about you that you don't care. But I'm going to find common ground with every one of these 435 men that sit in that Congress. I'm going to find common ground with them, and I'm going to bring them to my point of view and help bring them to some compromise. They want something. They want to see taxes cut. I want to see taxes cut. I mean, my gosh, what you got right now and what you're going to have if Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, I think, is it O'Malley or some governor of Maryland came into the race today. What you're going to have basically if those folks get elected is basically more of the same. What we've seen with American politics over the last 25 years is basically you get a choice of, it's like, am I going to have Burger King or McDonald's? Okay. I'm coming tonight to offer you a steakhouse, okay? I'm coming tonight to say, I got something different for you, okay? I've got a different vision. See every one of these sculptures that you see around here, every one of these pictures, somebody had a vision, okay? I have a vision, and I want to share that with you tonight. It's going to take just a few minutes, but I think we've got, I'm going to basically hit on 10 things, and I'm going to move through them pretty quickly because I know that we've got a small crowd here tonight, but I do want to hit on them quickly, and I want you to understand where I stand on these things before you leave. I think John Kennedy talked about a new frontier, and then Lyndon Johnson talked about the Great Society. They all have their themes for their campaigns. My theme for this campaign is to restore America, and part of mine is we've got a new challenge. We've got a huge challenge ahead of us. It's a new challenge for America. And the big elephant in the room in America that nobody's really spending much time talking about today is the $18.5 trillion national debt that we have incurred. Basically, we're at a pretty even place back in 2001 when our new President Bush at that point came into office. The Iraq war, Afghanistan war, and the programs of Mr. Obama, we have seen that go from basically where the debt was very small to now we owe $18.2 trillion. I checked it yesterday, I think is the amount. So what are we going to do about that debt, and how are we going to deal with it? I think it's got to be dealt with integratively. When I say integratively, what I mean is it's going to have to take a collaboration of different things to move America forward. We can't just say, okay, you're going to have candidates that are going to say, well, I'm going to raise your minimum wage to $15 an hour. And that sounds real good, and it sounds great. How's that going to help the debt? Okay. You're going to hear candidates going to say, well, I'm going to cut your taxes. Well, that sounds real good, but how's that going to help the debt? And you may hear a candidate say something about, well, I'm going to fix Social Security. Well, fix the debt. What are you going to do about the debt? So they're going to all hit you with different little things that they want to do. But I'm going to hit you with an integrated approach as to how America can solve this problem. Right now, just as I'm speaking at this point, we've got a situation where we're paying a little over half of all of the revenues that come into the federal government as interest on that debt. It's about 52% is what we're paying in interest on the foreign debt that we have right now. Can you imagine what kind of country we could be like? What could we do for our infrastructure in this country? How could we repair things, get things back to where they ought to be if we could just eliminate that interest we're paying on the debt? It would be a totally different country. I got my calculator out and I said, well, how do you put your arms around? How do I come up with what is $18.2 trillion? How much money is that? I mean, I couldn't fathom it in my mind. How would we go about approaching paying that off? And if we spend $1 million a day paying off the principal of that debt, I'm not talking about the interest, I'm talking about principal. If we spent $1 million a day, it would take us approximately 50,000 years to pay off that debt. That's where we are right now in America. That's how sad this whole situation is. I hope I got your attention with that. But $50,000. The problem is, to a large degree, federal spending is just out of control. And borrowing money to pay our bills, that's basically borrow and spend, borrow and spend, borrow and spend. That's what's put us into this sort of spend cycle that we're in. And really, you know, I don't blame the Democrats. I don't blame the Republicans. I blame everybody that's occupied a position in Washington as an elected official for the last 25 years for where we are. Because nobody has gone up there and said, I'm for the American people. I want to change this. So how are we going to get this, how are we going to integratively get this under control? If a family spent money like the federal government spends money, you may have seen this on my Facebook page, but I think it bears repeating. The median income for a U.S. family is around $52,000. If you take all the people's incomes in America, the median income is $52,000. So if a family spent money like the federal government spends money, they would spend $64,000 a year. They'd spend all the $52,000 they make, and they'd spend another $12,000 on top of that and put that on a credit card. Okay? And they would do that every year. And they would do that knowing that they already owed $312,000. That's what is wrong with the federal government at this point. They keep spending money, borrowing money, and just act like there's no tomorrow. So, it makes no common sense whatsoever, but I'm going to try to give you some common sense solutions to it tonight. So how do we deal with challenge number one, the debt? I think, like I said, it's going to take an integrated approach. It's going to take stop borrowing, stop spending, and start paying, create a surplus, and basically start paying down the debt. The only way to deal with your debts, I used to do a lot of bankruptcy work for people, and I would tell them, you know, hand over your credit cards. And I would sit there in my office and actually cut them up while they watched. And they would cry. You know, they were having to go with their credit cards, and I would sit there and chop them up into pieces and throw them in the garbage can. And I'd say, now you don't have any credit cards because the bankruptcy court's not going to let you keep credit cards. That's what I got to do in Washington. I got to cut up their credit cards. I got to say, you can't borrow money anymore. You got to stop that. So, I'm going to tell you basically 5 ways that I think we've got to deal with this as an integrated approach. You've got to restructure the bad trade agreements we have. You've got to cut federal spending. You've got to restructure the tax code. And you've got to balance the budget and create at least $1 trillion every year as a surplus to start paying this debt down. At that point, it'll take 18 to 20 years to get it paid down. We can do it if we'll just create that $1 trillion surplus. We've got about $4.5 trillion in revenue coming in every year in total revenue. So if we can create some additional revenue, and I can tell you how we can do that, we can begin to start, and we can create some surplus and cut spending. We can start addressing it. So, what about these bad trade agreements? We've all heard that free trade is a good thing, but I'm here to tell you tonight that free trade is not necessarily a good thing. I know I'm probably taking more time than you'd like for me to, but I'm going to try to rush through this. Free trade has resulted in a really bad situation for this country. We have seen the most massive transfer of wealth out of the United States in the history of the world with free trade. We've seen basically all our industrial base pretty much go overseas. In my county, Gaston County, North Carolina, where I live, we had over 100 textile mills in 1991, and they were all working bad, just booming, doing really well. Now we have one. They all moved out. They're all gone. They're all gone. And they went to places like El Salvador, Honduras, Mexico, Philippines, and just all around the globe. They were employing about 40,000 people. Those 40,000 people lost all their jobs. And what are they doing now? Most of them are living with people who draw Social Security checks, grandmas and grandpas, and a lot of them deal drugs, and a lot of them are doing drugs, and a lot of them have figured out ways they can qualify for Social Security disability, and that's what they get, because they cannot find a job or do anything because all the training they have is in textiles. So, that's what's happened in America. Since 1975 was the last year we had a positive balance of trade in America. That was the last year we had a positive balance of trade. Since then, we've had a $10 trillion negative balance of trade in America. I pledge, if I become president, and I hope that I do, that we will take steps to eliminate our trade deficits. We've got to figure out ways. NAFTA was the first big treaty that we dealt with. Bill Clinton promised when he was coming into office. Remember, he was running against Ross Perot. I don't know how many of you remember Ross Perot, but Ross talked about, if we pass NAFTA, you're going to hear this giant sucking sound of all your jobs and all your industry being sucked out of America. He was exactly right about what happened. They don't like to talk about it now, but that's exactly what happened with that. Bill Clinton said that NAFTA would create 200,000 jobs in the first 2 years, and that 1 million new jobs within 5 years. That's not what happened. With NAFTA in 1993 to 2013, if you take that period of time, 20 years, the trade deficit with Mexico and Canada it increased from 17 billion, that's what our trade deficit was, to 177.2 billion. That's what happened. And the result was the loss of 850,000 American jobs. That's what happened with NAFTA. That's the long and the short of it, folks. It didn't work out well for us. These free trade agreements were free for everybody else except us. China then stuck their head in the window. We're talking about 2001, and they joined the WTO. America then lost another 3 million jobs in that process. The minimum wage in China is $235 a month. That's what minimum wage is. So how are we going to compete with that? We can't compete with that. There's no way we can. When Mr. Obama, 2011, he claimed that the Korea-U.S. free trade agreement would support 70,000 U.S. jobs because it would increase exports of U.S. goods by $1 billion. Since the Chorus trade agreement was passed, the exports to Korea have increased less than $1 billion, and the imports from Korea have surged to $12 billion. And the result is another 75,000 jobs lost. And now we have the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And I guess most of you in here probably agree with me. This is probably not a good idea. I mean, I don't know, but basically what they're talking about doing is the president having fast-track authority on future trade agreements, limiting what Congress can do with those trade agreements. They cannot make amendments to them when they're proposed. They have to be submitted to the Congress the day the President hands them to them. And this Trans-Pacific Partnership, I don't know if you know this or not, it was not drafted by our Congress people or our drafting committees in Congress. It was drafted by 600 paid corporate lobbyists who were putting this Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement before the Congress. It's been kept in secret. You might have heard of Senator Elizabeth Warren got to look at it, and she challenged President Obama on it and said, this shouldn't be happening this way. And so we Basically, in a nutshell, it gives corporations the power to sue and overrule U.S. laws and regulations. It gives the power to foreign corporations to overrule the Wall Street reforms known as Dodd-Frank that we passed. It lacks any really clearly enforceable progressive labor or environmental standards or protections that we need to have in countries overseas. And this fast-track authority basically allows any trade bill to sail through Congress without any amendments or without any reforms. Corporations have basically got what they want. Wall Street's booming because, you know, where all the corporations are just about now from Wall Street, they're all over in China, Philippines, and they're in Mexico, they're in Canada, they're in Poland, they're in countries where they can get really low priced labor. In El Salvador, I bought a t-shirt and it's laying right over there on that table. I bought it at Walmart last week. I didn't bring it to the States with me. It cost me $3.83 for that t-shirt. And I'm not being a hypocrite by buying that. I hope somebody put on Facebook that I was being a hypocrite because I shouldn't have bought it, but that's what I believe. You know, but these people, these women, are working in these slave labor camps in El Salvador. They are making $7 a day. What they make there, their average lifespan is 68 years, and what they're making there, they have no benefits. They have unsafe hazards. They have bad drinking water. It's a terrible situation. Basically, they made that T-shirt. What they got paid for that T-shirt was like 2 cents for making that T-shirt. And so Walmart's able to take that and bring it over here and sell it to the Americans for $3.83. What we've got basically is a huge problem there, because that T-shirt is promoting slavery. And we need to be able to get hold of these foreign countries and make them comply with their trade agreements. Slavery is not something I believe in any form. And they're not keeping these trade agreements. The foreign governments are not. We need to say, okay, you're not going to keep the trade agreement. We're not going to import your goods anymore. Or, if you're going to send those goods over here, we're going to put a tariff on those goods when they come in the door. And it's going to cost you to be able to sell those goods to Americans. So you're going to have to pay these people more. And Walmart, the average worker at Walmart makes $8.81 an hour for a 34-hour week. They're basically earning below the Congressional Budget Office's poverty level with no health care. And we are looking at the government basically, since these people are all on food stamps and so forth, it's a sad situation. To subsidize and keep up the employees of just Walmart alone, it costs the federal government $1 billion a year to keep up the employees of Walmart. Walmart last year made $466.1 billion in net sales. Why can't they pay these people a reasonable wage? You know, if they just pay them a reasonable wage, then they would be able to we would be able to get all of these people off of the food stamps and welfare programs that they're having to be on, and we would cut and we would save a tremendous amount of money. We've got to deal with that issue. And we can't continue to just hide our head in the sand and say, we're going to let corporate America run over us anymore. We've got to stand up as Americans and say, no, enough is enough. We've had it. So we're going to have to deal with those trade agreements. So what do we do? I'll make sure that the access to U.S. markets is conditioned on a strategic analysis of our own national needs first, and not that of foreign companies and corporations. As President, I would support withdrawal from the World Trade Organization and all of these one-way free trade agreements like we've had with NAFTA, CORUS, and CAFTA, that have put us in the circumstances in which we find ourselves today, that we get out of them. or we declare them breached because they haven't kept their sides of it. As president, I would halt the sales of U.S. assets to foreign countries. China's buying up America like crazy. They're buying up gold. It's just unbelievable. They've got money we don't. We borrow money from China. We owe them over $1 trillion right now. We've got to figure out a way to get them slowed down because they are becoming the world top market with their currency is the most valued currency now in the world. And the American dollar is suffering for that. As president, I've looked for ways that other nations have basically established economic industrial superiority over us, and I'll say, hey, we need to copy them. We need to be getting industrial superiority back over them the way they did it to us. You want a free trade agreement? Then we want our terms on that free trade agreement. It's time for us to quit giving you economic aid through these trade agreements. I will appoint a special task force to help the U.S. develop a national strategy for rebuilding our industrial base. This is a matter of national security. Basically, if we had a war, how are we, this past wars we've had a good relationship with China, and we were able to import a lot of goods that the soldiers used, and we had goods being made overseas in countries that we had free trade with. And a lot of those countries made a lot of profits off of our war-making machine. But let's say all those countries decided they wanted to be our enemy tomorrow. What do we do to get the goods? How are we going to make them? We don't even have the technology or the knowledge to be able to do it anymore. We've got to bring that back. It's a matter of national security. We've got to deal with that. And probably one of the most important things that I would do is I would propose and try to have enacted new criminal laws with strict penalties that prevent lobbyists and corporate interests from dominating our legislative bodies, which has resulted in them having control and selling out the American people. We've got to deal with that. We've got to put a stop to that. The second thing I talked about is cutting federal spending. Now, the way I'm going to basically deal with cutting federal spending is when you get to the end of the day with me today, you've already seen some of the things I would do to cut federal spending. But I'm talking about how we do that. You'll kind of see it when I get to the end. So I'm going to kind of skip over that at this point. And I'm going to talk about restructuring the tax code. We've got to deal with the tax code and how we tax Americans. We've gone on too long now with a tax code that is thousands and thousands of pages long. We have to have CPAs and accountants and basically spend lots of money every year trying to figure out how to fill out a tax return. You've got people who have 8 and 10 kids, and they just keep having kids because they got all these dependency exemptions, and they just mount them up so they can just keep taking them off of their tax return. You've got people who are single, who are filing their taxes, and they're paying a lot more than people who are filing jointly, who are married and have kids and can take all these deductions. You got people that go out and overbuy a house so they can pay a whole lot of interest. I think it's time to go to a flat tax. And we've got to change that. We've got to make a flat tax go all the way in. The way I would do that is start at the poverty level and work my way up. If you make the poverty level or below, you will pay no federal income tax whatsoever. No federal tax on anybody making the poverty level below. If you go up the poverty level line, it would increase 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5% incrementally up to $30,000. Then above $30,000, I would go and increase it 6%, 7%, 8%, 9%, 10%, up to $50,000. And then everybody over $50,000, if you file an individual tax return, will pay 15% flat tax. So it's got to be integrated in that way. And all the details of that, we can work those out so that it's fair and how we administer it. But we need to get rid of all these corporate deductions for jets and yachts and all this stuff. Use your ordinary necessary business expenses. If you have employees and you have to pay employees, you get those deductions. But that's all the deductions you're going to get. You're going to get, if you have to buy paper, you got to buy pencils, whatever you need to have to run your business, obviously you'll get a deduction for that on your tax return if you're a business. But if you are an individual, your tax is going to be cut substantially. I would also do something quite different, and that would be to be able to raise revenues. I would tax investment income. Basically, people who are holding stocks and bonds for long periods of time. Some people buy stocks when they're really low, hold them all of their lifetime. They die. Their children get those stocks at a stepped-up basis. Then they can sell them, and there's really not much tax. It's just the gain between the time they die, what it was worth on that date, and what they sell it for. I say those investments need to be taxed annually, and we're going to have to go to some form of annual taxing of investments in order to, and they will be taxed at the ordinary gains and losses at the regular tax scale. If you're a millionaire and you've bought thousands of shares of stock, and it goes up 50% in 1 year, and you become more wealthy, that 50% increase is going to be taxed at the 15% tax level. If you've lost money in the stock market and you've gone down, then you can write that off of your tax return as being an ordinary loss. So taxing gains and losses on investments is one of the real key provisions of my tax code, because I think it has to be that way. Or else we got the $18.2 trillion debt. We got to pay it, and I think that money ought to come from people who are basically in a position to be able to be taxed to do it. It shouldn't come from the poor. It should not come from the middle class. Those are not the people that have put us in this position. It should come from the people who have benefited from all the boom on Wall Street. And let that Wall Street boom, let those folks carry the weight in solving this problem. Okay, and then dealing with how I would repeal the Medicare tax. I would repeal all federal and state taxes. I don't believe that it's fair that the family farm has to be sold when somebody dies to pay federal and state tax. So I would get rid of that. I would repeal capital gains. I would repeal all of the deductions and everything that goes with luxury jets and yachts. Like I said, the other thing that I would do would be to restructure Social Security. The Social Security Trust Disability Fund is going to run out of money in October of 2016. We already know that. That's projected. They're going to have to reallocate money from the Social Security Fund, which is money that I've been paying in over the years, so I'm going to get Social Security. They're going to take that money and use it to pay Social Security disability. If they don't, they're going to have to proportionally reduce everybody's check per month for Social Security disability because they don't have the money to pay it. They hadn't told you this yet, but they got to deal with it. I'm telling you, they got to do it. And it's right now, and here's how it's solved. Right now, you're being taxed on Social Security at 12.4%. And for most people who work for a corporation or business, 6.2% is paid generally by the employer. 6.2% is taken out of your check, and it's called FICA. FICA is right there on your check. I say we change that. I said, and we've got, and you're taxed on that up to $118,500. So somebody like me that makes $200,000 a year, say, I only get taxed on $118,500 of that income. I pay 12.4% of that. That's what I pay. And I think we need to get rid of the cap. I think we need to take the cap off Social Security. I think we ought to reduce the amount of Social Security tax. This will give an immediate boost to the people in the lower income categories. What you're talking about, everybody having taken out of your paycheck will suddenly decrease from the 6.2% down to 2.5% immediately, and as soon as that would go into effect. And so you're looking at basically a 5% tax on Social Security, and that will solve our solvency problems in the Social Security Disability and Trust Fund probably for the next century, I would say. We would not have any problems. It would be solid. That would mean the guy out here who's Adrian Peterson, who's making $30 million a year. I don't know if that's what Adrian makes, but running a football and whatever, he's making $30 million a year, and he's paying the same Social Security taxes I pay. You got CEOs out here that are making $35 million a year for these healthcare companies, these folks are going to, they pay no more Social Security than I pay. I say we change that. I say we make them pay 5%, just like if it's going to be a 5% penalty on me, it's going to be a 5% penalty on them. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, I don't think that's fair. They shouldn't have to pay that much. But they have the income. It hurts them just the same as it hurts me. When you take 5%, that's 5%. And it hurts everybody equally across the board. So that's what I would do. Now, to help cut further, we've got to deal with Social Security disability. And basically, part of the problem with Social Security disability is that we're still using the vocational guidelines that were established back in 1975. And some of them were changed just a little bit in 1991, but they were all based on industrial vocational jobs markets. When we determine that somebody is eligible for Social Security disability, they basically, the doctor writes a letter and says, this person can't work anymore. Well, where can't they work? Okay, we need a vocational expert looks at it and says, well, he couldn't stand on his feet anymore, or she couldn't stand on her feet anymore and work in a textile mill. Well, gee whiz, those jobs are gone anyway. But I bet you could sit behind a desk or sit somewhere on a stool and mix dyes or do something like that. I mean, there's a lot of other jobs out there. You could do pick up the tickets at the theater and snap them. There's thousands of jobs out there you could do probably. You could work in a convenience store. You could sit on a chair. You could like take change and make change. You could probably work in some place in food work. So you can do something, and basically we've got to be able to close some of these loopholes on how many people are getting Social Security disability. The problem is the amount of people who are getting Social Security disability has increased substantially. We're now up to around 14 million people in America that are on Social Security disability. That number needs to drop. That number needs to drop, not because they're not disabled, but because they shouldn't have gotten on it in the first place. These people need to be. So what you have is right now you've got the one doctor rule. Basically, you go in there, and I've done a couple of Social Security disability cases, but I know people who do it all the time. They say, all you got to do is find a doctor that says you're disabled, and you're in. You're good. We need to make it where the government can also have an independent medical evaluation done of you to see if you really are disabled and to determine disability. Have I bored everybody yet? I mean, totally. It's like, I feel like I'm probably boring folks, but I hope I'm not. But it does take this integrative approach. And we're going to have to, so we deal with restructuring the trade agreements, we cut federal spending, we restructure the tax code, we deal with Social Security, and we try to get we deal with immigration, we secure our borders, we basically set some time limits on getting illegal aliens out of the country because of situations, where they're here competing with American workers for jobs and stuff in a lot of areas. And when I say talk about getting them out of the country, basically I'm talking about they need to have the opportunity to become U.S. citizens. If they don't want to take that opportunity to become U.S. citizens, then yes, we need to get them out of the country.